The Liebherr LTM 1200-5.1 is a mobile crane with a maximum lifting capacity of 200 tonnes and a main boom of 72 metres. Conrad first produced this model in Liebherr colours as model 2101, and in this review we'll look at 210111 in the colours of Kanson and 210112 in the colours of Krane. The two models in special colours have been commissioned by Heavy Transport Models from Conrad. The Kanson model comes in a standard Liebherr branded box, and there's just a small sticker on the box to indicate the model inside. The Krane model is a bit different though, because it comes in an Krane branded sleeve with Heavy Transport Models on the box. Apart from the sleeve design, the packaging is almost identical, except with the Krane model you also get a collector card, which is a good addition. Both versions of the model come with a comprehensive instruction sheet. It's got a full list of parts and it explains the main steps of the assembly, and it's also printed in a number of different languages. Inside the box there are a couple of expanded polystyrene trays, and when you separate these you see that there are parts contained in both of the trays. The crane is the heavy part of the model, so it sits in the bottom tray, and you can lift that out carefully by grabbing hold of the boom. And the other parts contained in the bottom tray are various parts of the counterweight for the crane. Also tucked in the pockets of the box are a couple of bags containing small parts that need to be fitted. Moving along to the top tray, it includes the four parts of the fly jib, and these enable various configurations of the crane to be built, as we'll see later. In this section we'll set the crane up in transport mode, and the first thing you need to do is to separate the door mirrors, and as you can see they like to run away. But once you catch it, it's a straightforward matter just to press it into the holes in the cab, and they're a reasonable fit and stay in place. The next item to fit is some plastic handrails, and these go on at the rear of the crane. They're quite flexible parts, but they clip on okay, and the reason they are separate like this is because in fact they are folding handrails. To replicate those on the real machine, because when the crane is travelling you fold the handrail down as shown there, and when the crane's working you can open them back up to stand up. This little piece of model engineering really works quite well, and Conrad have done a good job with it. If you want to, the other part you can fit to the crane in road going formation is the fly jib, and you need to bolt a couple of the pieces together using the plastic bolts that are supplied. And then there are 3 plastic brackets which have to be installed on the side of the boom, and if you get those in the right order then that just allows the fly jib to be hung in place, and if you jiggle it about a little bit it's possible to get the fly jib to sit properly. The other thing you can do is to fit the hook, and the first thing you need to do is to take the tape off of the drum and pull some thread off, and then run it forward under the rope guide to the boom head and just over the pulleys at the end. And then you can just run it through the hook and tie it off at the boom end. This is not a difficult hook to reeve, and for transport mode just running it once through the hook's good enough. And then it's possible to hook the hook into the loop that's actually on the towing hitch at the front of the cab. And then the crane looks good, set up, ready for the road. Looking underneath, it's really very basic, there's no detailing at all, with just a steering mechanism to look at. The wheels and tyres look pretty good, and a good detail is that the third axle on the real crane is non-driven, and the model has a slightly different wheel design on that axle. The cab looks smart enough with its beacon lights, windscreen wipers and small headlights, but there's no number plate on the model. The detailing of the graphics on the Krane model is very good, they are all perfectly sharp and legible. And at the rear there are wedges for the wheels, a towing hitch, and the lights are painted. Detailing on top of the carrier deck is reasonable, including diamond plated anti-slip surfacing. The crane cab has some plastic grab rails, but there are no mirrors or lights. And the main boom is cast well, reflecting the cross-sectional shape of the real crane. One good detail on this version of the model is the Krane name on each of the boom sections. The lattice fly jib sections are metal, with the solid end being plastic, but it all looks good. The detailing of the Kanson version of the model is the same as the Krane version, with the paintwork and graphics being the only difference. Kanson is a Hong Kong based company, and the graphics are simpler than those on the German based Krane model. But the blue and white colour scheme certainly looks good. This is a heavy metal model, and trying it out on the test surface shows that it rolls very well indeed in a straight line. Picking it up, there's no sprung suspension on any of the axles, although there is some movement, so it kind of replicates suspension, I suppose. The steering is very good though. The front 3 axles are linked together, as are the rear 2 axles, and that means you can replicate a number of steering modes of the real crane, including crab steering, where the crane kind of goes sideways. And by turning the axles appropriately, you can set the crane to turn in really quite a tight arc, and when you do that, it still rolls along really quite well. To set the crane up, the 2-stage plastic outrigger beams just pull out. They're quite strong enough to support the weight of the model, and you can just wind the pads down, although the screw thread is quite visible rather than having smooth cylinder sides. Raising the boom is a challenge for those that don't have much in the way of muscles, because the cylinder is very stiff, but that does mean it won't bleed down. The arrangement of the counterweight is very good on the model because it separates into a number of separate slabs, so you could pose it in a variety of different configurations, and the slabs just fit together, as you can see here. The main slabs all could be fitted with little chains to lift them if you wanted to pose the model that way. And when you've got the main counterweight block fixed together, you've then got 2 cheek weights which can just hook into both ends of the counterweight block. The counterweight can be posed on the carrier deck because there are a couple of little upstands which the counterweight can slot onto, and that means you could pose the model loading its own counterweight during the erection process. To fit the counterweight to the crane, the first thing you need to do is to fit a couple of screws which screw actually upwards underneath into the holder, and when you've got them in far enough, there's a special tool that Conrad supply. It's a little plastic tool that goes on the top, and you use that to wind the screw fully up. The reason it's modelled like this is because it mirrors the way the real crane fits its counterweight. The screw heads hook into the counterweight, and then you can just tighten up the screws using the special tool again, and that clamps it up tightly. And when you do that on both sides, you get a good firm fixing, and the counterweight is fixed. This is quite a good little piece of model engineering by Conrad, and when you understand it, it works well. To extend the telescopic boom, you just pull out each of the sections in turn, and there's a standard kind of locking mechanism which just clips into place when every section is pulled out. And if you press the clip back in, you can just close the telescopic section back down. In keeping with the rest of the model, the fly jib offers quite a variety of configuration options. There's a metal pulley at the end of the lattice section which could be used if you want, or you could open up the swing away section, and that just pins into position to keep it stable. If you then want a longer fly jib, you can just use various combinations of the lattice sections to get the length that you want, and they just pin together again using the small plastic pins that are supplied. You need to be a little bit careful with these plastic pins because they are quite long and thin, so if you press them too hard and they don't go in, then they might bend and break. When the jib's assembled, you can just slot it onto the end of the boom head, and then it just pins into place with 4 small pins, 2 on each side. And once all 4 pins are in, this is a reasonably secure connection. There are some other neat little features on the fly jib. There's a little fold-out runner which just pins into place, and we'll see in a minute why that's needed. And the other good feature is that using a latch mechanism you can alter the angle of the fly jib. The latch mechanism works by just unhooking it and then opening it up a little bit and then hooking it back into place at the angle you want, and there are a couple of choices available. And you can see that with the offset angle of the fly jib that you need that little runner pulley to run the rope up from the crane to the end of the offset fly jib. Once you've attached the fly jib, you get really pretty useful extra length on the end of your crane. There is yet another option, which is to rig the crane with a short offset jib head for heavy lifting, and it has a little fold down pulley head which just pins into place. When that's done, you can just run the rope up over the runner pulley to the jib head. All of the pulleys used both on the boom head and on the fly jib head are metal, and these are an improvement over the plastic versions that were used on the first versions of the model. There are also metal pulleys in the hook block, and again we can reeve that up and just hang it from the end of this jib head. And that creates a good looking display pose. Only a couple more features to look at, and that includes the winch, which By using your thumb you can just raise and lower the hook, and the crane cab also tilts to give the operator comfort when working at height. With the model fully built up, you can understand why the tilting cab is necessary, because it stands about 2 meters or over 6 feet tall, and it's certainly an impressive looking model. The detailing of these cranes is good, but it's the functionality which is really the best feature because of the variety of display possibilities that they give. The Kanson and HN Krane colour schemes look great, and the models are highly recommended.